it's Amy and Maggie, and it's finally
Hello.
time. It's the end of 2025.
It's happened. The year has come to an end, and now we have to look back and recollect.
I feel like this happens at the same time every year, i.e. the end of the year, and yet it always feels like we're not prepared enough.
It's like, have we played enough games? And then you look back, it's like, wow, we played a lot of games.
We have played a lot of games. We've especially played a lot of smaller and lighter box titles this year because the big Euro games were mostly Essen releases this year.
Yeah.
And so all of those happened towards the end of the year, but throughout the year we were sharing a lot of these smaller box titles that we're going to talk about with our friends and family, and we found some real gems.
Indeed.
So we're going to start with an honourable mention, then we're going to get into our top 10, and spoiler alert, there's quite a lot of crossover this year.
Yes.
Apparently we agree on some things.
A lot of things, apparently. Yeah, well, we'll see what happens.
Let's get into it. Okay, so only one honourable mention this year. It is the game Take Time. Now, this actually came out quite late in the year. It's a very recent release, which is why it hasn't quite broken into my top 10. But we picked it up in Japan, but it was available in Australia by the time we got back from Japan.
Even in places that don't usually sell board games. It's
Yeah.
like, I'm at the supermarket,
right here.
and it's like...
I'm glad I imported it from Japan. No, but I saw this in store. I was like, that looks really fascinating. And what it is a cooperative game, and not the only cooperative game on this list this year, which
Wild.
is wild. But we tend to enjoy cooperative games that have limited communication, and this is one of those. So the way that this works is you and your team are working through envelopes of levels of challenges, and these are really these clock faces that are going to have challenges around them of what type of card you can put there. So you have numbered cards in hand, and they have two different suits, and basically you are trying to solve the puzzle together without communicating about what you have in your hand. But the really fun thing is there's also a sum element as well. So you're not allowed to go over a total sum of all the cards that are played in a level as well. And so you have to be really careful about the distribution of cards, essentially trying to put them in order for the most part, but then also trying to make sure they're as close to each other as possible.
But also meeting certain conditions, and again, that whole thing of not knowing who has what, and so there's like that kind of, okay, let's do this again. Let's like strategize in between the actual, okay, well now we're playing and so you can't.
Yeah, exactly. You're allowed to have a little bit of limited communication just before you get started, like, oh, if anyone happens to have this type of card, maybe we would put it here first, that kind of thing. But that very quickly falls apart when you're no longer allowed to speak. And another reason why it's not in the top 10 is just simply because we're only halfway through it, and I really want to see what the other puzzles are like. We haven't had a chance to get it to the table as much as we would like. But if that sounds like your kind of thing, check out this honourable mention, Take Time. Okay, so now let's get into our top 10 and our joint number 10.
Yes, a point of agreement.
A point of agreement
is Tacta. Now, Tacta was a bit of a surprise that it kind of came sort of later in the year for us, and we played it at a con, and we were like, oh, okay, interesting. I was quite attracted to the neon-like colors of the cards, and it's very abstract, which surprisingly that is sort of stuck with me. What you're doing is you're overlapping the cards. They have these geometric shapes on them, and you're kind of overlapping them on top of other cards, and you're kind of going to be covering up other cards along the way. And the cards themselves have little dots that signify the points for the color of that player. So every person is going to have their own deck of their own color, their particular color. And so the whole thing is just trying to strategize of how are you going to place this card to either cover the most points for the other players, or ensure that your points can't be covered. So strategically placing the card. Now, when we played, it's like, oh, this is really intriguing and interesting. But it's like, okay, whatever. And then the person that we were playing with was like, you know what, there's also a real-time variant to this. And we're like, okay, let's try that. That sort of elevated this to a whole other level of, it brings a lot of chaos. And I played this with my colleagues at work.
So did I.
Yeah, and we always sort of teach the turn by turn first, and then go into the real time. And for them, it was like, the real time that's very stressful.
I agree. It is definitely polarizing the more groups that we've played this with. Sometimes people just like the turn by turn, and that's okay too, because actually the more I played this game, there's such a joy in finding, as you mentioned, those spots where you can't be covered because of the angle of the card, because another card won't fit there. And then the way the edge of the table suddenly creates this boundary to the puzzle, and everyone's trying to like get real close to the edge of the table so no one else can cover them. love it. It's funny, it's highly interactive. It does have a bit of take that, and for sure it could lead to people, you know, being mean to one person. There's usually a lot of, I think this person is winning, so let's all try and cover their dots. So if you're not a fan of that, it might not work for your household, but it's light enough and it's, you know, breezy enough that really hasn't been a problem when we've got it to the table.
And we've ended up like buying so many copies of this.
We have,
because it's like, you know, I had an event at work, so it's like I ended up buying a couple of copies so that we could have multiple tables going at once. It plays quite a number of people. I think it's like 6 per box.
Yes, it says 7+ because you can also play in teams as well.
Yes.
So we've made up a lot of creative ways of expanding this game, and it just is a really flexible game because it has that slow pace if you want it. It has that fast pace. So I think it's like one that will suit like lots of different families and you know, bring together young and old. It's just, it feels like a classic of a title. So that is why it's our joint number 10 Tacta.
Now for my number 9 is a little game called Farmhand. Now, we play a lot of trick-taking games.
A lot.
And this one, so this is the funny thing, like at the end of the year, I start going through the list of all the stuff that has been released in the year and all the stuff that we've played, and I kind of capture everything and then start kind of highlighting the ones that really stuck with me. And out of all of the trick-taking games, this one just like, I'm like, every time I think of it or I see it, I'm just so charmed by it. And it's not because it's like the most like mechanically unique or complex. It's delightful. So in this game, you're essentially playing. It's obviously it's trick taking. You're also trying to predict. So you're doing bidding. The suits have different distributions of cards and different number of cards as well. You have a nice little player rate. The animals are really cute, but you're essentially animals in a farm trying to compete for the farm. Like the human's attention, essentially. And so you're trying to like be loud, but the whole thing is as you're playing, if you play as loud, same number as another player, then it's like these two animals are canceling each other out, and so you're not getting the attention.
Just like in real life.
Just like in real life, yeah. And so it's like, so the interesting thing when you're playing is sometimes you're like, oh, you know, this should win, but then if someone else plays the same number, then all of a sudden someone who was hoping potentially not to win is like, oh no, all these people, like they cancel each other out and now I'm winning this trick. So it's just very, very simple, beautiful, cute little illustrations.
I'll also add to that, you have a little bit of information because you can see the suits of everybody's cards on the, you know, and that's not new, but it's interesting how it comes together with trying to predict what card they're going to play.
Yeah, and you also know obviously the distribution, and like there's a suit that only has one card in it, so you know exactly like what card they have.
It's also always nice to see an Australian designer on the global stage. This game has really taken off, and so, you know, we've met Craig, the designer, and he's absolutely lovely, and, you know, just so happy to see the success of another Australian designer out in the world.
Yeah, so that's my number 9, Farmhand.
Okay, so my number 9 should come at no surprise to anybody because we just did a video about how I purchased 10 copies of Pensterdam. Now, to set the record straight, I did not know I was purchasing some of the last copies on eBay Australia. I had no idea. And then everyone was like, you bought all of them. But they have actually relisted and restocked this game. So I got, you know, I had a lot of angry comments, but I was like, maybe you wouldn't even
want this, and then
did you know about this game until I made the video? But look, it's been restocked, and so happy that is finally available. But this is an unopened copy because in order to put this back in its box, I would have to solve today's puzzle, which I haven't done.
Look, after we recorded, I was packing it away, and I couldn't even pack it away without trying to solve a puzzle, just like figuring out a way to put the pieces so that they all lay flat, and I still couldn't do it.
And look, Maggie has no patience for this puzzle, but what is this puzzle? It is a little wooden puzzle. This is by Plate Games, and essentially you are trying to put in all of these polyomino tile pieces and then revealing spaces in the negative space that show today's date. So every day it's a different puzzle and you're just trying to complete it. And apparently, actually, there are multiple ways that you can complete each day's puzzle as well, but I don't think that helps me at all. Every puzzle takes at least 10 minutes on a good day, sometimes 20 to 30 minutes, you know, on a struggle day, and Maggie has never once completed.
Or lifetime, if you're me.
Never once completed this puzzle, but I'm going to do that thing where
Playtime, lifetime.
I'm going to do that thing where I sneakily add other titles into my list so that
you
I can
love
have more than 10.
You love a combo.
I do.
A cheat.
I do.
One in, like many in one.
But it's kind of related, although not. But it's another plate game, so I'm going to throw this into the list as well. It is Orapa Space. Orapa, I think is how you say it. But essentially, the original game Orapa Mine was based on a diamond mine that is in Botswana. This one, they've just kept the naming convention, I think, because it's essentially the same game with a space overlay and now upgraded components. And I have been thrilled playing this game. Okay, so it is a deduction puzzle, and it is very similar to Battleship, where you are essentially mapping out where you want to put your planets, and then the other player is trying to find and ascertain where those planets are in which position. But the interesting thing about how you get information in this game is one of the key ways is you send a laser down one of the parts of the grid, so whether that's a row or column, and the other player is going to give you information on that basis. First, they're going to tell you where the laser exits the puzzle, because the planets have different angles on them that are going to send the lasers bouncing around and out of a different part of the puzzle. And then also all the planets are different colors, and so when the laser exits the puzzle, it is a combination of those colors. If it only hits a red planet, then it's going to be red, but if it hits a red and yellow planet, it's going to be orange, and so that gives you information about what it has touched and passed through. So this is hilarious.
I just enjoy how, like, we've had games where Amy has been like so overly confident. It's like, I would like to solve the puzzle, and it's like nowhere near. And it's like, oh yeah, that's how that. Or yeah, where I'm like, that is impossible. Where like I'll give okay, I want to send the laser this way,
and I'll be like, it comes out purple.
Like, no, you got that wrong.
And Maggie's like, you don't know how to do the laser thing.
It's like,
and then we'll compare puzzles, so we're both we both made a lot of errors here. But it is a really fun, funny, mostly 2-player game. You can play it multiplayer, but then it involves just having one person giving the clues while everyone else is trying to compete to solve it first. But yeah, as a 2-player, it's got beautiful magnets. It's got little stands that hold the things up so you can't see each other's board. I really have enjoyed my time with this puzzle as well. So 2 plate games that I've absolutely loved this year. And those 2 are my number 9.
Now my number 8 is a game Ruins, which we don't have because it's been lent out at the moment.
We'll just put it here.
So Ruins is by John DeClaire, who's very famous for the card crafting mechanic. And so this is a climbing shedding game where you are card crafting. That's hard to say quickly. So in this game, you are essentially exploring different ruins, but realistically, it's just like, I love the cards because they're like, I like the illustration modes, but it's fairly abstract in that you are trying to obviously create melds that are stronger, but you can actually build up those cards. So sometimes you can kind of turn them upside down, so they have like a day side, night side with different numbers. But then you can add different abilities to the cards, and they stay like that. So they're kind of built in. Some of these like translucent cards get added into the sleeve, and they stay like that throughout the game. So some of these cards end up getting really powerful. You can also claim some cards with your color, which then means that if when they get shuffled, if they come back out again in any player's hands, they come back to you. But obviously, because it's a shedding game, you don't necessarily want to have too many cards unless you know you're going to be able to play them and get rid of them. So this was a really interesting one. I just loved all the different ideas that went into this.
And speaking of having a lot of ideas in it was one of the more polarizing games that we reviewed this year, in that it obviously hasn't made my top 10, but I didn't really gel or connect with it. And I think it's because Maggie enjoys games where I won't say it's fiddly, but there's definitely an element, like in this game, even when you pack it up, you need to like pull apart all the cards and everything. Maggie has way more tolerance for that than I do. I'm quite impatient when it comes to that, and I felt as though the gameplay was not the smoothest just because you're turning cards around, you're adding things. The cards to me are very big in hand, and I found that quite uncomfortable. And then the end scoring where you essentially 2 people, if they draw, are then having this battle while everybody watches. Like it was just a lot for me. It was a lot for me. So but I respect all the reasons why you like it. There's a lot of good ideas in there.
Yeah, I do. I just still find it really really intriguing in terms of all of these different things, and I just like kind of playing it out, because every time it's like you just have these. It can be quite chaotic in terms of like the rounds and the super powerful cards, but that's
too chaotic.
Yeah. That's my number 8, ruins.
Now, my number 8 is actually higher on Maggie's list, so we'll leave it and talk about it when we get to it.
Yeah, and so my number 7 is another game that we don't have the box for here. It's Petticoat, which is the Oink game where everyone has the same deck of combinations of animals with different colored hats and numbers. And the whole thing about this is, again, it's not like a thematic game, but what it's going on that concept that humans will see patterns where there's just true randomness. And so there's going to be a
sometimes there's an actual pattern.
Yeah, well, sure. That's what happens around the table. Yeah. So you're going to be displaying, there's like a central display of, the combination of animals with their numbers and their hats. And there's going to be a card, a question mark card, that is like, well, which one would go here? There's no correct answer, but then people will see a pattern and that sort of feels more satisfying in terms of like number, or color, or animals and book endings or like sequence. And so people will kind of make up that particular animal that they think, or combination that they think should belong there. And again, there's no one correct answer. And so
you keep saying that, but sometimes there is actually one best answer.
Well, yeah, it's a pattern sort of thing. So all you're trying to do,
like a mathematical best answer.
Well, all you're trying to do is match with at least one other person in the table. So it's one of those games that is like, it's very easy to explain, and then it's just that collective thing of like, wait a second, how is the table thinking? Like, how are people thinking, and what's the unspoken sequence or patterns that people are kind of gravitating towards.
I actually love and adore this game, and as Maggie's talking about it, I'm like, why isn't it on my top 10? But I thought I could vicariously live it through Maggie and not add another sneaky game into my list. But this game is just so easy to explain and teach, and I love the vibe that happens around the table when you start to have a hive mind with one particular person, and you just feel so connected. You're like, you see the world how I see it, like, let's do this together, because you get points if you both have the same answer. So you start to get this like almost semi co-op vibe about it, where you're like, we're gonna, we got it again. So I really enjoy that part of the puzzle. Oink Games actually released a couple of new games this year. The other one I will talk about just quickly is Pick and Packers, which is like a Christmas themed game where you are driving a drone, and both people put like their fingers on each side of this drone, and everybody else is betting on how many houses they're going to be able to get to stack presents and not drop them. And I've played this with my colleagues at work, and it is just so funny and such a light, great holiday time puzzle. So if you see that one around, it is chaos.
Did you just manage to sneak in a second game into my just piggyback of my number?
And I didn't even tell you I was going to do that. I'm sorry. Okay. Now my number 7 is also higher on Maggie's list, so I'm not going to talk about that. See, this is why I have to keep adding things, because everything's higher on your list. I don't get an opportunity to talk.
Get the FOMO of speaking.
Yeah, but actually our number 6 is a combined number 6, so we can talk about that together. So
where is it? Oh, it's over there. It's buried.
It is over here. But I want to talk just a bit of background. So this year, Maggie and I went to both Tokyo Game Markets. So if you were following along on that, maybe not interested in Japanese games, and that's totally fair as well. But we did buy, I would say, 130 games from Japan, and we've played so many of those. Not all of them from the last game market, but most of them. We've played a lot of games recently, and we actually, for the first Tokyo Game Market this year, we did our top 10. And this game was not at the top of that list, but
it was not in the list.
It was in the list, but this game is the game that, of all those games, has come back to our table again and again. It is the game Identity, and we've avoided putting other Tokyo Game Market games on this list because we know it's absolutely impossible to find them. This one is going to be difficult to find, so we've kept it to just this one at number 6. But it did get a reprint recently, so if you are going to Japan, we did see it around at different shops and things, so hopefully you'll be able to find it if you're there. But why do we love this game so much?
Look, again, it's that thing of like, at the end of the year, you start going through all of the stuff, and it wasn't on the top of that list, but it stayed with me. It's one of those that every time, I'm going out, we're seeing, either with work or we're going at a con. It's just a really satisfying one.
Tell about its theme.
Thematically, it's like you're all teenagers wanting to be unique and independent. And so it's a trick-taking must not follow game. So the suits represent different styles, like teenagers with different styles. And so as soon as a suit is played, no one else wants to...
And the number.
So
this is really unusual. Must not follow game where it's suit and number. So essentially you just cannot follow either of those things, which
Yeah.
really limits in your hand what you can play.
Because all these other, teenagers don't want to, like, oh, how embarrassing. I can't be wearing the same thing that,
Yes.
this person's already wearing. And so, you're having to play something completely different. And so the further you are in the turn, the more limited you are, because a lot more variation has already been played. And so the way that, what's interesting about this is if you're having to, if you can't play off suit and off number, you have to play face down, and that's going to be negative points. However, at the start of the game, you're bidding using the same cards, and the cards actually go from minus, like negative numbers through to positive numbers. So you could actually have a negative bid. So you can say, I'm going to be, minus
you look
two
at your
or
hand and you've got all the same suit and all the same numbers, and you're like, oh no, this is not going to be good for me. So you actually have to take cards out of your hand to create your bid, which is really cool. And you can kind of basically bet on underperforming in this game. And when it gets down to the last few rounds, the first round everyone's always really like ambitious, and then the second round everyone's like, oh no, when you get towards the end you have so limited options that you're almost certainly going to start taking
but it's also one of those where, like, the first round you're like, I have no idea how this is going to play out. So you're just essentially figuring out like how it's going to feel.
But it's so easy. It's so easy to understand the rule set, and it's also just so compelling. As soon as you explain that theme to people, everyone smiles and laughs and understands that idea of like two teenagers not wanting to look the same when they go out. How mortifying. So for that reason, Identity, I don't know if this has been picked up by a big publisher, but I expect it might be at some point. So that is our number 6 and a little gem from Japan, Identity.
Now, our number 5 is also a joint number 5.
We agree on so many things.
Yes, but
it is the season.
It is the season. It is the season. So this is new publisher, Gamehead, and the game is Trinket Trove, which, first of all, I was just immediately attracted to the absolutely adorable little mice in this, the illustrations of the mice. And what you're doing is you're essentially like you're auctioning, even as mice, for like these little treasures, which are like all these random little things that might be hidden or like bits around the house kind of thing. And so the cool thing about this is you're bidding, so your hand of cards, it's both it's the set collection that you're wanting to, like the cards that are going to go towards the set collection that are going to give you points at the end, but they're also the things that you're going to be bidding with. So you're having to kind of go, well, I might have to get rid of this for the hope that I'm going to get, these other cards. Every single card has its own sliding scale of how many points it's going to get based on how many of that card you get. And sometimes it actually kind of goes up towards the middle, and then if you have too many, goes down, or the other way around, where it's like if you have few, you have a good number. If you have in the weird middle, you actually lose. So it's simple, yet there's enough in it that is quite like intriguing.
Yeah, there's so many good choices that you have to make from your hand, because the bid gets stronger as well if you play multiple cards from your hand. So you're constantly like, what do I give up in order, or what do I sacrifice in order to try and follow my dreams to collect something else? So I really love that tension, because sometimes you're just sitting there and you're like, I want to keep everything in my hand. And then you can bid 0, but then you're not going to, get first pick at, choosing what you want. And I really like the way that the turn order really does matter in this game, and the way that that's influenced. So there's a lot of game in a little box, and everybody has just been really charmed by this game.
And the illustrations as well, like the scale of things in terms of like how big, like a marble is, like this sort of, it's like a what do you call it? Like I always forget the
crystal
name.
Ball.
A crystal ball. Yeah, it's just so adorable.
It is. Yeah. The only one thing I'll say is there's a ton of cards in here, which I love, but sometimes you just don't see the card that you're hanging out to get. But that's kind of part of the chance, and whether you're willing to take the risk and hold that card in your hand, waiting for its friend. Yeah. So that is our joint number 5 Trinket Trove.
Now my number 4, which is actually Amy's number 8. Is another old play game called Oddland. So Oddland is super charming. It's one of these games where you are playing kind of meld. So everyone's sort of contributing to this central landscape where you are overlapping different types of terrain. And then as you're doing that, so on your turn, you're placing one of those cards to expand the terrain. And then you're placing one of the different animals. And these animals they're odd creatures. So you're essentially trying to document these odd creatures as you're traversing the oddlands, and they're like a hybrid of usually two animals, and they all have a unique scoring condition. But as when you're essentially committing every round, you're committing to, well, now this is the time that this is going to be in the position where that's going to score.
And this is from turn one.
From turn one,
you have to decide, okay, there's very limited habitat or area that's been built out, and I'm going to commit to this scoring condition. Now everybody knows what I've committed to, and they are definitely not going to let me score more points than I already am, or they're even going to try and cover up the points that I already have. So the first little, sacrifice of a meeple that you put out there, you're like, well, that's really not going to score for me.
Yeah. So needless to say, there's a lot of terrain tampering that happens throughout.
Yeah.
So, but it's one of those games where like the cards, the illustrations are really love. The concept itself is really simple, but just having the uniqueness of, I really, or someone's like, there's a particularly tasty terrain type that's been created. That's the other thing. Like, you can only have one critter per terrain.
Yeah, so only one person can score that terrain. So as soon as they put their meeple down and they're going to score it, it is really the ambition of everybody else to reduce the number of points that they're going to get. So it is like a mean game, but it's short and it's like super, super interactive, and it gives me vibes of like a short, easy version of Carcassonne. If you enjoyed that game and where everyone's vying to score something that's been collectively built, that's what you get from this. But I just love, and it's a first-time designer as well, I just love that sequence of having to commit to scoring conditions so early on that you're just like, well, what am I really going to focus on? And then of course you're like, oh, should I do something over here that's going to give me a few more points, or should I mess Maggie up and cover like her habitat over here? And because you always have to place your meeple on the piece of habitat that you're placing, it means that you just can't be mean for mean's sake, because you're going to have to place a meeple over there. So you can't just be like, I'm just going to cover this for fun, because you have to commit to a scoring condition there. So just really clever design. It's easy to get to the table, and it's just been a hit with everybody we've played it with.
So that is my number 4 and your number 8, Oddlands.
Okay, so now into my top 4. This is my number 4. And this is where we start to get into that really upper echelon of small box games. Now, this one technically is a 2026 title, but I didn't want it to get lost in the 2026 games because it's really close to release, and this is a full copy that we have, not a prototype. So I really want to talk about it. It is the game Borealis. Now, Borealis, thematically, it's about scientists doing an Arctic exploration and documenting different types of wildlife. Did I get that correct?
Yeah, that's it.
But really, this game is super abstract, and it is a brain-burny puzzle. Don't be fooled by the art cover.
The cutesy,
yes,
animals on the,
the cover art, I should say, is super cute. And then I was like, I don't know, this looks like it's just going to be a super cute, maybe really light game. And then you start playing, you're like, hang on, this puzzle is cool.
I remember we were playing the very first time. It's like I learned it, I taught it, and we were playing at a con, and everyone was like, why am I so stressed?
Yeah, like, it is stressful. And so what you're doing is you are, basically there's hand management involved, where you are choosing a card to play out of your hand, and that is going to dictate how you're going to be able to move scientists that are on top of these essentially columns or exploration tracks. Now, the card is going to say, maybe the pink scientist is going to move left and the yellow scientist is going to move right, and it tells you what direction they move in. And then you're going to be able to move your exploration track underneath those scientists. But the interesting thing is how that compounds, because you're trying to essentially program many steps ahead, because you're like, okay, if I move my yellow scientist to the right, then it's going to be there, which means next turn I can play this card because that will move it back left. And essentially you're trying to optimize that, where you're moving scientists around and not sending them out to camps, because if they all end up in camps or you can no longer take any moves, you're having to do a bit of a reset action. And timing is so important in this game, because then there's also matching symbols that you have on the cards, and then there's this whole other layer of, if I match the symbol with the scientists I want to move, then it's going to move the track, the little flag on the track, which is going to, land on, a matching symbol, and so that's really important. And then there's this whole other element of the race objective. So the main point of this game is to really try and get as many points as possible by meeting the randomized objectives for that particular game, which keeps the game super fresh, but it keeps the tension like, ratchet it up to like a 10 because everybody's looking at everybody else's puzzle like, oh, you're just about to hit that, so maybe I should pivot.
It's like multiple people can get it, but only on that round. So as soon as someone activates it, it's like it's either now or never kind of thing. And if they activate it and they're like one of the last players in the round, then it's like you've missed out kind of thing.
Yeah. So it has everything that I love. A high degree of it, competitiveness. I love a race objective. The puzzle is really, really crunchy, like way more than this would suggest. So if you like that kind of thing, I'll also say though, it is accessible enough from a rules overhead.
Yeah, it's not a complicated one to teach or wrap your head around.
You can easily teach it. So if I think about games like Harmonies, which I like truly, really loved and we talked about a lot and that really hit with a lot of people, I feel like this is maybe crunchier, definitely crunchier than that. But it has that same level of, wow, like what a simple thing to teach, but then the layers of like how you optimize it means that you can play with someone who's fresh to the game or someone who really wants to challenge themselves, and there's something for everyone in this. So you can tell I'm really excited about this game, which was a complete surprise. But yeah, check it out. I think it's coming out early 2026. My number 4 is Borealis.
All right, so my number 3 is actually higher on Amy's list, so
is.
I will hand it over to you again.
Back to me, and now we're into the top 3. So my number 3 is a game called Toy Battle. Now, I don't have it here because I lent it to a friend who absolutely fell in love with it, and that it was impossible to find because we had purchased it at PlayCon in Sydney when I saw it there, and I knew it was hard to find, so I snapped it up. I think it has been stocked now. But anyway, it has been super popular for a reason. It is a 2-player battle game where essentially if you've played the old game Stratego, it is very, very similar to that in that you've got these tokens that essentially are going to have different levels of defense and you're going to be playing them out onto a board, and essentially you are trying to capture the flag. You're trying to get to the other player's home base and they're trying to get to yours, but there's another way to win. There's little stars that you can collect on the way, and when you surround those stars, you're going to be able to collect them, and each level has a goal for that too, so it can end in 2 different ways. But on your turn, really simply, all you're going to be doing is either drawing more tokens to add to your arsenal, or you're going to be playing a token out that is going to have some kind of power or benefit that might allow you to draw more tokens. It might allow you to skip forward on the map. And what you're essentially doing is creating a barrier for the other player to move forward towards you, because in order to cover someone's piece, it needs to be a higher number. And so you're trying to create like your force field of people to keep
your defense line,
but essentially you're also trying to move forward, so you're trying to work out, should I use a low number here or a high number, or should I keep my high number for when they play a high number so I can go on top of it. And so there's a lot of little decisions that you're making with this game that has again such a low rules overhead, and you can play it in 10 to 15 minutes. And that's no exaggeration. You can get through a game of this really quickly. But the cool thing about the production of this game is it comes with a whole number of maps, and the maps have just slight tweaks and changes to them. Maybe the layout's slightly different, maybe there's a different power that is activated on the board. And what that means, because it's so short, is in like the span of an hour you can play through all of the maps. And that often happens when I introduce people to this game, because you're playing like, okay, how about another map? And it's just so snappy and easy and addictive because it's like, okay, let's go again. No, I've got you this time. So once the rules overhead is quite light once you learn what each character does.
You can even play it with kids, so it's like it's simple enough that it's like and like you can have a little bit of asymmetry in terms of like there are some maps where it's like depending on the position you're going to be at an advantage or a slight disadvantage, and so it's obviously we don't have kids and don't play with kids ourselves.
We've heard a lot of people who play with their kids, and I just think this is just really accessible but super thinky and really, really fun, and I wouldn't be surprised if it slowly creeps into my best 2-player games of all time. I really, really enjoy this game. Lots of people said I would enjoy this game too, and people are quite good at predicting what I will like.
It's very head-to-head, so then you know how I feel.
Anyway, that is my number 3 toy battle.
Now, my number 2 is a game called A Wild Venture. Now, this, again, is one of those, the first thing that grabbed me was the illustrations and the art in this. And it's this cute little village where you have all these different animals, and there's this competition where you're trying to essentially be the most helpful animal to the village. And so you're going to be going on all these different quests and adventures. It's entirely card-based with like a few tokens to keep track of things. And you're going to be meeting some of the residents, and you're going to be getting gear that then gives you different abilities. You're going to be kind of constructing buildings as well. And so the whole thing is, it's like an engine builder, because as you're playing cards, obviously you're getting money to like be able to pay for the cards and play them. But then you're also going to be tearing those cards down. So they often will have just a finite number of uses, which is what you're using often tokens for. And then once you use them, they kind of go into like, they get tucked and they're like in the sort of sleeping kind of area. But then ultimately you're going to have this at the end. The scoring is based on the different kind of combinations of icons. So like, for example, with the residents, it's like the ones that you got the most of times the ones that you got the least of. So you can't just completely ignore one type of resident. And so it's just one of those games that has got like these different decks for different kind of versions essentially of the game or modes. And when I was playing this, I just loved all of them there's a lot of card reading, but it's simple enough that it didn't feel overwhelming, even though there's so many cards, and the illustrations are so beautiful on every card. I'm just like, So this was one that initially didn't have a solo mode. I'm like, this needs to have a solo mode. And then thankfully, the designers did create a very, very easy solo mode. I was so enamored by this that I even kind of hacked a solo before the official solo was created. Like I would just spend like nights just kind of going, oh yeah, it would work like this, because I just love being in this little universe and this little world. So,
and mechanically it is really interesting. You know, building up that tableau and then deconstructing it is really cool, and you're super incentivized to do so. So I really enjoyed that element of it. The reason why it's not in my top 10 is simply because there's very little player interaction. I often felt like I was kind of just doing my own thing and not really keeping track of what Maggie was doing, even though there is a tiny bit of positive player interaction in that you're triggering cards that they have in their tableau at certain times.
Some things might trigger like your gears and then like kind of make them evolve quicker and things like that.
But for the most part, it is a pretty solo experience, and so that's why it was quite surprising that there wasn't originally a solo mode, because it feels quite solo when you're
I should say it's only a 1 or 2 player game. So it was originally a 2-player game, and now it also officially a 1.
So it can stay in the collection so that you can continue playing it.
Yes, that's my number 2, A Wild Venture.
Okay, so now on to my number 2. So that was a 2-player game with very limited interaction, and now I'm going to talk about a 2-player game with an extreme amount of interaction. It is the game Zenith, which was also Maggie's number 3.
Yes.
So very, very highly rated by both of us. Now, unfortunately, we do not have a physical copy of this game, and I tossed and turned about whether we should include it in our list because we haven't played the physical copy, but it is that good that we couldn't overlook it for this year's list. It is on BGA, and so we've been playing it on there digitally, and
I was so desperate that I was even like, is there a print and play version of this game that I could just even like hack? And like there was like, I just have to wait because it's in pre-order everywhere. I was like, no.
Now, one of our community members in the Joey fam taught Maggie this game online, and then Maggie was like, Amy, you are going to love this game. I'm like, I don't know. You're overselling it. Like, I don't think I'm going to love this game.
Because I played it, and I'm like, and so like, we were kind of chatting about it, and like, you know, the community member, Mel, was like, what do you think? It's like, it's really interesting, but it's a bit too abstract. And it just stayed with me. And then we like, you know, played a couple of games. I'm like, Amy, you're going to love this, because I can't stop thinking about this.
And then we started playing together on BGA, and we both really adore this game. And why do we love it so much? Well, it has an extreme amount of tension built into a 2-player experience, and there are a couple of hero games in our collection. You know, Seven Wonders Duel is one of our ultimate, I think, if not the ultimate 2-player game in our collection. And I love games like Paris City of Lights, which is also very tense. This brings that same level of tension, but in a very different mechanic. What you're essentially doing is it's a tug of war across a number of planets, and you're going to be playing cards in order to move the planet closer towards you, and the other player is going to be trying to pull it back, because ultimately you're going to win the game if you get 3 of one planet type, you get 4 of different planet types, or 5 of any planet color tokens across the board. So it's essentially a race to achieve that, but then the tension comes in because there's so many ways that you can use your cards. So you can use your cards for the action that they give you, plus the movement of the planet, which is the obvious way, but then you can also discard cards in order to build up momentum on different tech tracks that are going to give you cumulative benefits the more that you use them. And so that can be really powerful as well. And then there is another part of the game that's going to allow you to take control of a token that will essentially increase your hand size limit as well. And so there's so many things to keep track of. So a bit like Seven Wonders Duel, where you have to be monitoring what is your opponent doing.
You can't just be focusing on your own thing. It's very much you have to be mindful of, what's the state of the board, how many of these kind of planet tokens does my opponent have, and what distribution of them do they have, how close are they to getting these things. So,
and so you're kind of like, do I spend my turn trying to stop them from bringing the planet towards them and bring that back closer to me, or do I, go forth on my own objective? So you're constantly looking at that balance. The other thing I really love about this game is the engine building part of it, where the more cards you have of a particular planet color, the less they're costing you. So if you are investing in one, it's just getting cheaper and cheaper, which is why there's a little bit of a negative interaction, a bit of a take that kind of component where you are able to take cards out of the other person's set collection or tableau to slow them down a little bit when they start to get that momentum.
This is a tense, thinky game. This is the opposite of a cozy game. If you don't like that sort of take that, I don't know if that'll be the... But even with that, it's because there's so much kind of going on and so many different levers. It's just... Despite my better judgment, I'm like, I can't stop thinking about this. So I'm like,
and when we play, it's always really close. And I just love that tension. And so I just cannot wait to get a physical copy of this game. I have been bugging the main distributor in Australia so much. I keep emailing them just being like, when is it releasing?
We were willing to bring it in from overseas, which is always ends up being so expensive. But it's even in Europe, it's on pre-order. It's no, it's just
there are some early copies out in the wild, and I don't know how they got those or how many of them there were.
Which actually, as a foretelling, it may actually mean that this might end up becoming a 2026. Sometimes they change on BGG. So at the time of recording, it's saying 2025. So that's why it's included in this list.
It's included in this list because it's brilliant. And I can't wait to get my hands on it. It is our number 2, my number 2, and your number 3, Zenith.
Now for my number 1, this was another absolute surprise that I thought, I think I'm gonna enjoy this, but I didn't think I would be as charmed as I was by this. It's the game Tenby. Now Tenby is this cozy, cute, adorable little game where you are building out the town of Tenby, which is a town in Wales. And so you are essentially you're drafting different types of cards to build out your street. So you're building multiple streets with buildings and some parts, because it's a coastal town, there's going to be some of the buildings will have or some areas will be by the coast, so they'll actually have water. So the whole thing about this is, as you start building one street, and you're placing cards adjacent to the cards that are there, those cards can't move now. So you're kind of adding to the edges, and the cards have to match. So obviously, street side has to match with the street side. The water ones have to match with water, and then you're also trying to. Every card will also have some kind of scoring ability that makes you really pay attention to the beautiful illustrations, because some of them might be like, this is going to score you points for street lamps on the cards that are one card to the left or one card to the right, the adjacent cards. Or some of them might be 2 cards to the left and right. And so you're really paying attention and looking at or sometimes it's birds. That has a bird, or flowers, or and so I find it very mindful. Also, it has its own soundtrack, and so you can actually just play this gorgeous little set the mood kind of soundtrack, because Benji Talbot, the designer, is also a composer. So this whole beautiful soundtrack has been created, so you can kind of set the scene.
Didn't Benji also illustrate it?
Yes.
So
many talents.
Too many talents for one person. There's too many talents.
And even playing it solo, there's all these different modes of challenges that you can do, and so it's just there's so much mindful, just truly kind of cozy.
It is a really cozy experience. Mechanically, it's pretty simple. The action selection kind of system and turn order, the way that changes, it's not super new there. But what I really liked about this game is when you are looking, like you said, the scoring conditions are so built into the illustrations, and it really feels like you're creating this super cozy series of streets. I love that it's got water on either side. It's just really peaceful. I really have enjoyed this game as well.
And so there's this whole thing of also like you're kind of getting these resident cards they're giving you another different scoring condition, but they're incentivizing you to close streets, because then you get more points if you manage to close a street. And that's essentially, there's these cards that have a tick on them. That means that the street is complete. And then as soon as that's sort of done, then you can add to that street. So there's just enough little things going on that it's not fiddly, it's not convoluted, but it's delightful. So it just charmed me, and that's my number one. 10B.
Okay, so my number one should be no surprise to anybody. You probably already predicted what it is. It is the brilliant design that is Eternal Decks. Now, this game we covered in prototype form. As soon as from the first game I played the prototype, I was like, I need to talk about this game. It was one of those where you just are sitting there and you're playing it and you're like, how did someone design this? Like, it is so fantastic. It is by Hiroken. It's a Japanese design. He is the designer of Trick Takers or King's Trick Takers, a game where, there's trick taking where you've got characters. So very complex and interesting design. This one is, firstly, it's cooperative.
Yeah, a co-op.
A co-op at number one.
What is happening?
What is happening? But I tell you what is consistent in, we do like cooperative games that have limited information. And in this one, you certainly have limited information about what your fellow players are dealing with in their hand. Because in this game, what you're trying to do is you're trying to just basically stay alive by being able to play cards in a series of sequences. And if you do that correctly and you're able to complete one of the puzzles by following the sequence that's dictated by the row, then you're going to be able to collect a new deck of cards that's going to keep you alive in the game. And you are trying to balance everybody doing that so that everybody can stay alive and not have to burn through the lives that you have in this game. And the way that the puzzle evolves, there's a different challenge that happens every level. So you can play out this entire experience with the same group or different groups of people and like level up, and it gets harder and harder and more interesting. But it is is both mechanically brilliant, but also the illustration style
gorgeous.
is gorgeous. It is so compelling. And even when we had the prototype, it was beautiful, but now we've got the, full publish edition. I know that this game has been hard to find and people are trying to get copies of it from everywhere. It is worth the wait. It is really fantastic
so
design.
Unique. I still can't understand how you design something like this. It's just so clever, because it's that whole thing of like, now you know that this player has this deck, and so you don't know exactly what cards they have, but you know the types of cards that are going to be in that deck, or like the rough distribution, and so you can then use that as a way of...
And why that matters so much is because you have restrictions placed on you as a group that everyone's going to be deciding upon as well. So if I pick up this deck, nobody can play red cards, but looking at what you have picked up, like I know that you've probably got a lot of red cards, so maybe that's a bad idea. So you're trying to just balance what you think everybody has in their deck of cards. So clever. So clever. And the designer is so lovely and deserves all the success. So, it was a no-brainer to put this as my number one. I really have enjoyed a lot of the other games on my list too as well, though. This one probably will get to the table less as because it's a little bit more involved from a teach perspective and, setup perspective, whereas some of the other ones are more filler style games. But from a pure design, this deserves to be number one of 2025. Not on your list, but on mine. So that is my number one, Eternal Decks, and that is our top 10 small box or lighter style titles for 2025. We'll be back in a little bit with another list looking at our top heavier games or Euro style games as soon as we finish filming that. So stay tuned. Drop in the comments, what was your favorite light game or smaller box title of the year? What do you keep coming back to? What are you bringing to the, season's events?
What surprised you? What do you just love sharing with other people, or going, I just want everyone to know about this?
Yeah. Tell us things. But anyway, Otherwise, we'll be back with more board game content soon. But bye for now.
Bye.